I come to Bangalore quite often. I've lived in the United States since 1971. So that's 47 years, which is more than the age of most people here. So I'm an old guy, but at 68, I'm still younger than Prabhupada was at the age of 70 when he started. So I keep reminding myself that Prabhupada started at the age of 70. So that's a great inspiration. I wanted to come to this temple for many years, but somehow people organizing my plan each time, we would somehow, something or other would happen, it would get cancelled, or I would say next kind of time. But this trip I decided that, the time has come, there's a certain inner calling, I have to come here. And in particular, to meet Sri Madhu Pandit Das ji, Prabhuji, whom I've heard so much about. And I must be honest in telling you that I've come here not only to speak on something I've written in my book, but also to learn from Prabhuji in the subsequent Q&A which I will do, to understand more about Krishna consciousness and his unique way of explaining in a very scientific, technical style. So I'm here for sharing my knowledge and also learning knowledge from him. One of the unfinished projects I'm working on, I have a whole lot of these projects, and if Sri Prabhupada could do dozens of books after starting at the age of 70, then my ambition to finish 15 more books still, I think I should be able to do that. So one of those is a book where I'm discussing the great gurus who made a global impact. So I give each guru their due, with respect, explain from their point of view what they are all about, what they transmitted, how they changed the world. But then after that I do my own analysis, and in the style of a computer person or engineer or technical person, I have these grids and I do a comparison of how this one, that one, what is the profile, what are the capabilities, what are the specialties of one approach versus another approach. And the conclusions I draw state that the guru, that Sri Prabhupada among all these gurus is distinct in his ability to stay very authentic to an ancient tradition without compromise, without worrying. Without worrying about conformity, what will people say, maybe I should secularize, maybe I should say, oh, it's all the same. He didn't worry about that. And he was willing to take all the criticisms, it didn't affect him. So also a role model in courage, a role model in sticking to, his truth, and then being able to transmit it and teach it to lakhs of people from all nationalities, not compromising what is expected of them. So not this business about chalta hai, you can be doing this also, but you can keep doing that also. Do just this in the weekends and do a little bit of breathing, but you can still keep doing what you're doing. And don't worry, whatever you're doing is fine. Truth is one, it's all the same. None of this mumbo jumbo, but very, very clear that you have to make sacrifices. There is tyag, you do give up things. You give up this and adopt that. Everything from your identity to your dress, the way you eat, the way you live, your thoughts. There is a certain, alignment with the cosmos, a certain alignment with the cosmos that is required in a certain way. So this is very distinct about him, and therefore I'm looking forward to completing this kind of a book project, and that's one of the reasons I'm here, because I feel that right here may be a valuable resource to help me in my projects. So I'm delighted to be here for that reason also. The talk today is on a book called The Battle for Sanskrit, which is a battle not only for Sanskrit as a language, but Sanskriti as a civilization. When Europeans suddenly realized that Sanskrit is an amazing language in the 1700s, their so-called discovery, and how close it is to European languages, it generated a lot of excitement among different European scholars. And what they call the field of Indology became a very big field all across Europe in all the universities. The study of Sanskrit dominated the study of Latin and Greek in many universities, because they realized that there is so much richness in the texts, so much new to learn, and also how their languages are derived from Sanskrit, so it was not clear how to rewrite their history, because their history which they had written is from biblical origins, now had to be adjusted because linguistically and in terms of grammatical structure it's more related to Sanskrit. So how do you accommodate this? Many rival theories started. I won't go into that. That's another topic of mine, the history of Indology. I'm writing in another book on how these debates shaped up. But suffice it to say, there was a frenzy of appropriating knowledge from Sanskrit, recharacterizing it as European. I call that constructive project, to construct who they are, what is the German history, French, English. They all had rival armies and politics. They were at war with each other, and they all wanted to have some relationship with Sanskrit, a very positive relationship with Sanskrit. So this was a very interesting period from the late 1700s for slightly over 100 years, and shaped many things in Europe. Linguistics was born out of this. So much Western philosophy, some of the great Western thinkers learnt a lot from this. Some acknowledged it, some hid their debt to Sanskrit by wanting to claim it as their own original discovery. A lot of botany was discovered, a lot of mathematics, a lot of different sciences were discovered, and so on. Now, that's the constructive part, helping themselves construct their own civilization. Christianity benefited a lot. In the last 200 years, there's been a lot of Christian theologians, Jesuits and others, looking at our dharma, our texts, borrowing so many ideas into Christianity. So there is also another project I have, which is the Christianity, modern Christianity's debt to dharma, which is not widely acknowledged. But the Christian scholars who did that work acknowledged it. We need to basically compile all that, put it together, and bring it out. That's what I'm doing. So the constructive use of Sanskrit is a good thing, because we should share this knowledge and people can benefit from it. However, there's another part to the story which is not so nice. There is also a disruptive part. They were constructing their identity, their history, their knowledge from the Sanskrit tradition with one hand, and with the other hand denouncing it, denigrating it, abusing it, distorting it. So it's a two-pronged relationship that the European scholars had with the Sanskrit and Sanskriti traditions. Disrupt them, meaning the Vedic tradition, and construct us, meaning the European tradition. Disruption, construction going on in parallel. Now, there have been many waves of this 200 plus year journey of the West with respect to the Sanskrit traditions. And I am not going to go into all the waves because that's a big project by itself. But I'll fast forward to the latest, which is the topic of my book, Battle for Sanskrit. The latest trend, you see, until now, the Marxists were denouncing Sanskrit as a Brahmanical language which should be removed. So shut down the Sanskrit universities, don't study it, don't chant it, don't read it, it's a wrong thing. So that was the trend of post-colonial studies and subaltern studies and all of that. But the latest trend is different, and this I want you to pay attention and understand. The latest trend by the same people who are destructive in mentality is to actually infiltrate the Sanskrit world, learn Sanskrit, use it to disrupt from within. So as an insider to the tradition, you can infiltrate, you can join certain sampradaya, you can join some Sanskrit university, you can study some kavya, you can translate works very, very brilliantly, but your intentions are to dig up dirt, to find things that can undermine. So it's like forensics. You know, if a CBI team comes and camps out in your business and says, we're going to study you, you don't feel very happy, wow, they're studying me, you know, but because their intention is something else. And the financial expert they bring, the chartered accountant they bring, has to be very good in accounting and finance. He should know what to look for. He has to be competent to do his job of forensics. Similarly, to do the forensics in Shastra, to dig up things that they want, the people have to be well trained. So do not dismiss them as people who are incompetent. They are not incompetent. They are very competent. Ravana was not incompetent fellow. Very, very smart fellow, very learned fellow. The intention is different, but the level of proficiency and competence can be pretty good. So please keep that in mind. Now, in a summary, what they are trying to do is reinterpret the Shastra as hiding a built-in human rights crisis within the whole Sanskrit tradition, a crisis that was, abusing people of lower strata, women, outsiders. This is according to this school of thought, this school of Sanskrit studies that has been brought in from the US now. According to them, this is built into Sanskrit, it is built into grammar, it is built into Vedas, it is not something that happened recently, this is right from the beginning. So the purpose of Sanskrit studies, according to them, is to excavate, like an archaeologist excavates the old stuff, to excavate this truth about Sanskrit by being a very good Sanskrit scholar, digging up all this stuff. So when people tell me, why are you complaining against these people? They're coming and funding Sanskrit studies. They're expanding Sanskrit studies. They're praising Sanskrit as a beautiful language. They're saying that Sanskrit is very brilliant. The point is, they are not arguing about the brilliance of Sanskrit. They are not arguing about the beauty of Sanskrit. They are basically saying that all this brilliance and all this beauty hides beneath it a very insidious, a very negative, a very horrible kind of mentality and intention, which is elitism against all other people. And this is true from the Vedas, and it's true in the Mahabharata, it's true in the Ramayana, it's true everywhere according to them. So, what we call sacred and liberating, they call political and oppressive. So they will look at Mahabharata as a kind of template for violence against others, a Ramayana as a template for abuse of others, and they look for gender violence and all kind of other violence. The interesting thing is, some of these people have even theorized that Bhagavad Gita was added later to the Mahabharata. There's a theory that says that Krishna it seemed that Krishna's character is so negative because he's asking for genocide. This is what they say. They're asking for killing, genocide. So to soften his profile, to give him a gloss, it was later decided to put in some good stuff, philosophical stuff, and the Gita was invented to do that. And they date the Bhagavad Gita post Christ. So it's a after Jesus event, this Gita being composed, and some of them say under Christian influence. These kind of philosophical ideas, these ideas about love and philosophy and all that, metaphysics being injected into Mahabharata after the fact. So this distortion of history, this distortion of dates, intentions, what the purpose of the Shastra is a very deep rooted, institutionalized machinery on a very large scale, which is producing this kind of stuff. Because you might wonder, why is it that so many leftists in India are suddenly going to a place like Columbia University or Harvard or Chicago, getting some degree in Sanskrit? And why pursuing a career in Sanskrit? Well, because that way they get to influence the young students. They get to poison them with this new ideology. So, we welcome everybody to come and enter the tradition, study it. But I think our tradition required a certain process of cleansing, a certain sattvic lifestyle, a certain commitment with which to approach, and that of course is being violated. Now, the title of my book is Battle for Sanskrit, and then it says, is it sacred or political, is it liberating or oppressive, is it dead or alive? Because another claim being made is that Sanskrit died over 1,000 years ago because Hindu kings killed it while the Muslim kings were trying to save it. This is a claim, that they were trying to fund it, they were good, but this Hindu king example given here and there. So there are a lot of mumbo-jumbo logic hidden beneath our mountains of data. Lot of data, hundreds of pages per book, very heavy books. If you start reading, you will feel, this must be true because this guy has documented all kind of very detailed evidence. But after reading pages and pages of evidence, which is all factually true, properly documented, somewhere there is a one line saying, and therefore we can conclude X, but that is not a valid conclusion. That it doesn't follow from all this data. It's just sort of sneaked in, so that you may believe that this is the case, and you may not even argue and debate because you are so overwhelmed and so much in awe of the mountain of data that they have gathered. So this distortion is a very dangerous thing, particularly because our own people did not recognize it for a very long time. And this takes me to an important story. Just a few years ago, some friends who are lovers of Sanskrit and our tradition, who are big shot Wall Street tycoons, billionaires, they were asked to fund a chair at Columbia University for Sanskrit studies, set up by Sringeri Mutt. And they were raising money, millions of dollars, so some of them called upon me. And I said, I like to do due diligence. I like to do purva-paksha. I like to first understand what's going on. And it became very clear to me that this group of Marxist, leftist, insidious approach to Sanskrit as a human rights nightmare had managed to get an MOU with Sringeri Mutt to use the Sringeri Mutt blessings and authority and set up like a mattha in Columbia. Columbia would become the first foreign mattha of Adi Shankara, according in this system. And these guys are the guys who would have custody over it. So I raised a flag and I said, I need to study more. I need documents. I need to know who will control, what will you teach, what are the rules. What are the rules for selecting a guru? Who will select the teacher? Will it be as per our tradition? Or will it be somebody who goes to the local bar and eats a cheeseburger and then he comes and teaches Sanskrit also? Who teaches all this? Who's going to decide? I mean, And it became very clear that when I asked these questions, they were very upset. The Indians donating millions of dollars just wanted to be on some board, advisory board, Columbia University, Ivy League, good for business, networking. You sit with big shots, big American billionaires, good for your business, all of that. It was more like, okay, I made my money as an Indian, now I'm going to become the big shot American also, and these few million I can give for that. They were really not looking at it for love of tradition, although they were saying that. So I, in my own personal capacity, did this, sticking my neck out to fight for this. So I started writing problems with this whole arrangement and why this would hijack the whole tradition, because these people also had a goal that once we've done it with Adi Shankara in several universities, we'll go to Madhavacharya people, we go to Ramanuja people, and we'll raise money and we set up these matthas all over. So the American Academy would become the caretakers in the matthas for the next few generations of our tradition. And you see, like so much knowledge they've taken from us, recharacterized it as their own, in their own reframed, distorted way sometimes, and then exported it back to us. This would also be like that. So we would be, in future, we would be dependent, we would be a recipient, a consumer of knowledge produced by those guys about our own tradition. And this is so unacceptable to me. So I started various campaigns, got myself into more trouble, which I'm always getting into trouble. So I got myself into more trouble. And I wrote emails, faxes to the Shringeri Shankaracharya. But somehow I got the impression that somebody is intercepting and these are not getting through. Then finally a lady in Chicago told me that she has a way to get me direct access to the Shankaracharya, bypassing his own gatekeepers, his own administrative people who were blockading. And this person had some special relationship. So I was given this opportunity to go there with, I think Dr. T.S. Mohan was with me. Is he here, Dr. T.S. Mohan? Yes. Where is he? There's Dr. T.S. So you and I went with some other people. So we went for a very important, that was one of those moments that changed course of events. So I won't go into the details of all the things that happened, a lot of drama, but I was able to give the Shankaracharya, in a nutshell, a good argument that said, in the spirit of Adi Shankara's debating tradition, you do purva-paksha of the opponent, you do uttar-paksha, you face each other. In the same spirit, I want to do this with the people in Columbia. You can adjudicate, you can be the judge, and before you proceed giving them this huge franchise to take over the tradition for international consumption and international marketing of the tradition and representation and being the ambassadors of this tradition globally. Before you do that, please hear me out, and I'm about to write something. It'll take a little bit of time. And he didn't say yes, he didn't say no, but I could tell that he's encouraging me. He actually encouraged me, said, you're right, you go and do it. He didn't commit whether he's going to proceed with this project or not proceed with the project, but certainly many things I told him he had not heard before. Certainly some of his own people had gone out and done this MOU. He was not fully informed about it. And certainly some of these people who are in his own organization who had gone around and done these things had their own ambitions, their own ego, because they'll become big shots and so on. So I told him I'm writing this 100-page, evaluation of this whole school of thought in the West and whether it's good for us or not. Now, this project became bigger, and instead of 100-page, it became almost 500-page book, or big book, and that's the Battle for Sanskrit book. So it is my attempt to understand what this global movement is and explain to our own gurus so that they are careful. And I'm happy to say an outcome of this is the Chingeri Mutt is not pursuing this anymore with Chingeri. Now, to give you a brief insight and analogy of what I'm talking about, how serious it is, suppose someone were to do the same kind of thing with Sri Krishna's tradition and all the texts, similar to what these guys were doing with the Shastras in general. Suppose someone wanted to do this specific to the Sri Krishna tradition. What they would say is things like, the tradition is beautiful, the language used is so nice, there is so much poetry, we love the dance, we love the music, all that to make you feel like, wow, they love us. But then they would say, actually the character of Sri Krishna is, devious, he's exploiting. Actually it's to encourage violence. Actually this is used as a system of exploitation today. And this is coded language among the elite to explain to each other how to exploit the other people. So in other words, if they were to come up with this sort of a deep interpretation, while on the surface wanting to praise, that would be a very insidious thing. It would be far more dangerous than somebody coming very openly saying, okay, I hate you, I oppose you. At least you know where you stand with that person. At least it's an honest disagreement. But this is a very devious kind of approach. And this is what was going on. Now, the research work of this school of Sanskrit studies, which is now at the cutting edge in the West, the research work is full of jargon which our people won't understand. Imagine if things were the other way around. Imagine if we were colonizing them. And imagine we were studying their whole history through our lens, our categories, our vocabulary. Suppose we were studying their whole philosophy, their religion, their entire way of life, their culture through our lens. We would be talking about rasa, we would be talking about tattva, we would be talking about gunas, we would be talking about all kind of vocabulary that they won't fully understand. And we would be referring to various scholars who have written, various authors who have written our texts. They wouldn't know what we are talking about. It would be very difficult for them to understand our intentions. It would be very difficult for them to rebuttal us without having to spend 10-15 years first understanding our tradition. Because we would be using our tradition to write. Now this is exactly what they're doing from their side. The Western scholars referenced 99%, I would say 100% of the Sanskrit scholars I came across in India never heard of those. That's the reference, those are the lenses through which they're studying us. So the jargon being used is also very complex, very innovative, come up with new terms. And the sheer use of English is so heavy, so convoluted, very convoluted. It's not just normal English. I took the books written by these people about our tradition. I gave copies to so many Sanskrit scholars, eminent Sanskrit scholars. Some of them would come back and say, it will take me at least 2 years to even read this book. And you are asking me to write a response. I said, look, you are more qualified than me to do a purva-paksha. I've done my job, opened the door, opened the gate. Now you have to help me. I literally went around looking for help. But it was not easy to get help because some of them were saying, why should we care? The truth is in my heart, it doesn't matter. And I would say, well, the whole tradition of purva-paksha requires you to understand the other side. It requires you to do this. And this is an intellectual Kurukshetra. We are in intellectual Kurukshetra and you have to engage these issues. Some of them would say, somebody else will do it, it's the government's job or whatever. Some of them had sold out. Because the Western system is very good at picking up brilliant students young, take them overseas, treat them well, turn them around, brainwash them, deploy them as part of their own way of life. And so many of our people have come back and become like that. And then some of them would say, look, I do want to help you, you are on the right track and you need help, but I can't even read this kind of heavy stuff. And these are people who are well read in English, because this stuff is very convoluted, written in a very convoluted way. So I had a boss in Michigan in the computer industry, and I'm reminded of something he said. He said, if you cannot dazzle them with brilliance, baffle them with bullshit. If you cannot dazzle them with brilliance, baffle them with bullshit. Meaning just give them some bakwas, they won't know what's going on, and baffle them. So a lot of this jargon heavy is actually an attempt to do that only. So if you really are well informed and you take the time, which may take you years, to understand what they are saying, you will see it is full of holes, not logical, so many gaps, so many assumptions. But most people won't go through that. They are dazzled with the brilliance that this is, wow, this guy compiled so much information. He can quote so many things, And so our people assume that these guys, they are rich, they have a lot of money, they're coming here helping us out, and they seem very nice. They come, they have tilak, they have dhoti, they do bhajans. This must be good, All this must be true. So this is the problem of being dazzled with brilliance, baffled with bullshit, but thinking that this is brilliance. This kind of has happened to our people. I'll give you 2 examples of jargon. So just in the interest of time, I'll give you 2 examples of what it took me a very long time to understand these 2 terms. Reading and going on reading, and if they refer to some 17th century Italian philosopher, I would go read that guy. If they refer to some other 15th century person somewhere in Europe, I would go study that guy. Just keep tracking. It takes a lot of effort to do this. So one term is called, the term literary. Literary, to be literate is to know how to read, write. So literization is to make a society literate. If you know how to read, write, that is literization. So what they have done is invented a new word. So this new word is spelled a little differently, and they tell you this is not literization, this is literarization. There are 2 r's, r. So this is literarization. Instead of literization, it's literarization. Now, they are saying that the difference is as follows. To know Sanskrit as a language for common events, common things, to order a cup of chai, to order a taxi, to record a transaction between some buyer and seller in a court record, marriage record, to record mundane, daily, ordinary, vyavarika things, is all you need is literization. That's level 1. But they said Sanskrit is the only language which also has a device that they don't talk, Sanskrit people don't discuss, but we the Westerners have uncovered it. That is its potential for literarization. And that means as follows. Literarization means the power built into a language to generate influences of, political consequence. You can generate hatred, human rights violations. You can generate a hierarchy of haves and have-nots. These structures are built in a way that is not very easy to understand. It is unconscious. It is built in a subtle way, beneath the surface. So a language has to be, for a language to be used for political power over others, being just literate is not enough. You have to become literarized. Your elite has to become literarized in the correct use of this language for this particular power. So this goes on for a long time, that Sanskrit has the ability, the Sanskrit grammar, Ashtadhyayi, all kinds of very important texts have built into them this kind of a character, that there is subtle hidden power structures which only the elite, and that's why it's kept secret, they know how to use this. So this is a very sophisticated theory that these people have come up with. The second term I will introduce is called the aestheticization of power. Aestheticization of power. Aesthetics means like, dance, singing, love, pop culture, all the bhajans we have. It's aesthetics, a lot of aesthetics, beauty, the use of beauty, rasa. So this theory says that the entire tradition knows how to exert power in a way that is disguised underneath aesthetics. So all these very beautiful aesthetics serves a purpose of perpetuating the power of the king. So the question they want to ask is, how and why did Ramayana spread all over Asia? How? So they say there was no army. It's not like the Roman army went and militarily spread. No such thing happened. There was no evangelical group. It's not like Christianity or Islam spreading with evangelists wanting to convert people. No. So if there's no military method of spreading and there is no evangelical machinery, how did this happen? So they're going to come up with an answer which they feel is a very original discovery. The answer is that the Brahmins taught the kings in various places, in Cambodia, in Thailand, in Vietnam, in all these different countries where the Ramayana went. They would go and teach them that if they adopt this aestheticization of power, the Brahmin can teach the prince Sanskrit in a certain way, so this person can aestheticize, he can charm, he can impress his subjects. He's so learned, there's so much beauty, there is the Rama Leela going on, there is all this dance going on. All that aesthetics mesmerizes the public, but it hides the exploitation of the king, and this allows the king to stay in power and not get overthrown. The question, there's a Frankfurt school of Marxism. It's a school of Marxism. They wanted to find out that if so much exploitation was going on within Europe, why didn't the European proletariat overthrow the European elite? And under classical Marxism, there is supposed to be this class struggle, there's supposed to be a revolution. And so how could Hitler have emerged when the Germans are so educated? How could it have happened? And so on. They wanted to understand what went wrong in the 20th century, first half of the 20th century, the rise of Lenin, Stalin and Hitler and all that, what went wrong, why so much exploitation. They wanted to understand it. And they came up with this idea that Hitler was very good at aestheticizing his power. He had a lot of drama, plays, the greatness of Germany, make people feel good. Sort of like saying that today, this cricket and Bollywood is the aestheticization of power, which keeps people happy, feeling good, while the exploitation can continue. So aestheticization of power means that the intellectual elite, which is the Brahmins, and the power elite, which is the Kshatriya king, are in a conspiracy that they will use Sanskrit and its power to aestheticize, which is the power of kavya. So you see, this is very interesting. Kavya serves the purpose of mesmerizing people, keeping them happy and feel good, like the opium of the masses. They feel very good because they go to this performance, everybody nice in music, everybody's so happy, they come back. Why fight, why revolt? Things good like that. So this aestheticization capability built into the kavya, especially Ramayana and then others, is a device to maintain asymmetry of power, exploitation, keep people happy, they won't revolt. And this was the reason Ramayana in particular spread all over Asia, because these very, very clever Brahmins built a franchise. They go to the king and say, this is a method, you keep your power. You don't have to have reform, you don't have to give rights, you just keep your power. And because this aestheticization will teach you. So he goes on. The biggest example he gives is that the Brahmins were writing a lot of prashastis for the king. Prashasti is sort of a praise. You great king, you are like this, or you are so mighty and all that stuff. So the Brahmin would perform the role of making the king appear very noble, beautiful, aesthetic, so that the public would respect the king. So this is the Brahmin's role of aestheticizing the king. So he's not shown in the literature as a bad guy, whatever he's doing. The role of the kavya, the Brahmin who's writing the kavya and making sure people are performing in a certain way. The role of this is to aestheticize the king's power. So that, and in return the king gives the Brahmin a lot of, keeps him in business, gives him grants and keeps him in business. So the king helps the Brahmin helps the king, and they're together exploiting the public. So this is the, dozens of examples of prashastis were cited in these books to show that this is what was really going on. So in one of the sections I wrote, you see, the leader of this school of thought is a person called Sheldon Pollock in Columbia University, and he's got a multi-million grant from Rohan Murthy, son of Narayan Murthy. And so on the website, he's written a prashasti for Rohan Murthy. Rohan Murthy is so nice. He's one of the few young people who understands the glory of Sanskrit, and he's promoting this and promoting that. So I wrote back in my purva-paksha of these people saying that actually you are using the aestheticization of power to keep yourselves in power. This is a conspiracy between the elite. This is a conspiracy between the Western and westernized Indian Sanskrit elite today and the Indian billionaires who are funding them, so that the Sanskrit elite makes the billionaire look very aesthetic and very noble, and it's very good for his image, and the billionaire keeps funding him money. And this is you guys exploiting all of us and basically distorting our tradition, is a good example of the aestheticization of power. What a brilliant theory. Now you can see why they hate me. Yeah, because I'm basically turning things around back on them. Now I'll come to, before I conclude, a problem we have is that we've forgotten the tradition of purva-paksha, which means you study the other honestly, fairly, with respect, not abusing, not bombastic, but literally clinically studying. I'm doing the best I can within my limits. But our traditional people are not doing it. Our traditional people are not dissecting the Kurukshetra. The intellectual Kurukshetra has so many forces that need to be studied and understood, and we need to give responses to them. This is the job of our learned people, which I'm not finding to be the case. They're not doing enough of it. Now, you might say, okay, where are these people who are doing all this Sanskrit, stuff? Where are they headed? What are they trying to do? They've infiltrated. They're doing some distortion. They are trying to train an army of left-wing Sanskrit Pandits to go into and take up positions in various places, various institutions. What's their end game? They've written about their end game. It's not a secret. We just have to read what they're writing. They've come up with a term called liberation philology. Philology is a Western name for a kind of mimamsa, or how to make sense out of a text, how to interpret. How do you take Bhagavatam and interpret it? How do you take Rig Veda? How do you take some Upanishad? How do you take Ramayana? How do you interpret it? Making sense of a text is philology. So, liberation philology is to liberate the oppressed, which in Marxist terms, you know what it means, the subalterns and all that. the minorities and all that. So liberation philology is a kind of philology that says we will excavate from the texts things that will help liberate these minorities, because we'll equip them, we'll arm them, we'll tell them how they should fight back, who they should fight back, who's been exploiting them throughout history, who to blame. And this, of course, as you know, is fragmenting India. This is what the Breaking India forces are all about. This is what's causing all this minorityism and fragmentation and things like that. Including, Constitution has some issues, including courts, like Supreme Court has problems discussing, properly interpreting our texts and our traditions, because they are also influenced by a very westernized idea of Indian culture. So this liberation philology is a project to reinterpret texts almost like writing new smritis. Smritis are human interpretations. So in this 21st century, if they have it their way, then it will be a new brand of Sanskrit trained people in the West who will come and write smriti for a new Dharma Shastra for human rights, a new Dharma Shastra for minority rights, a new Dharma Shastra for feminism, like that. So there will be people claiming to be qualified in Sanskrit and well versed and well read in our own Shastras, who will write dissertations and things like that, to create a new Dharma Shastra, new Smritis for the future of our own tradition. So it's a very serious and very insidious inside job. It's an inside job. Now, this is the disruptive part. I told you that there's always disruption going on and construction of themselves, something useful. While this is going on, there is another field called computational linguistics. Computational linguistics is at the cutting edge of computer science today, and it's based on Panini's grammar. It's Panini's grammar, which is kind of an engine in the computer science, computational linguistics, and is used for things like understanding language, understanding speech, translating from language X to language Y, which Microsoft is doing, which all these people are doing. If you look at the Microsoft project as one example only of language translation simultaneously, guess who are some of the consultants hired? They are Sanskrit scholars from India. So, on the one hand, you have sucking this knowledge for good intellectual property, for constructive purposes, for them. And on the other hand, you have these projects like liberation philology to do the disruption. So both of these are going on. In conclusion, my worry is that we don't have enough leaders, neither in the spiritual parampara side nor in the political side of the dharma or civic side, and certainly not in media, certainly not in academics, who are concerned about these things, who are concerned enough not to just go give a talk here and there. A lot of manthans and literary festivals where they're taking all this work that we've done and just recycling it. I'm not talking about that. But going deep into new research, new purva-paksha, new tapasya, we need to do it on a very large scale, because we are up against a huge intellectual army. So we need to train many intellectual kshatriyas from our own side. And I don't see enough concern from the leaders. I see, some interested person here and there, but I don't see enough concern. So in conclusion, the reason I am here, one of the reasons I'm here, besides meeting you and enjoying this opportunity to share some of my thoughts, is that I want to have an engagement with Prabhuji here for me to understand more about Vaishnavism, more about Krishna consciousness, and to explore collaborations where we can actually do some of this cutting edge research, which I said is not happening and needs to happen. So with that, I will conclude. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for watching. You can subscribe here and also hit the bell icon to make sure you get notified. To donate, please click this button.